All right, we might kick off. I'm Courtney. I'm the Farmer Learning Manager at Soils for Life. So thank you for coming along for our first Orchard Convo with Darren Doherty and Campbell Mercer. This project, these Orchard Convos are part of our Orchard Resilience project, which I'll talk to you about in a second. But firstly, a little bit about Soils for Life. We are a not-for-profit supporting Australian farmers to regenerate soils for resilient businesses, landscapes, and communities. We're all around Australia. We've predominantly been working in grazing and cropping, but this year we're starting some really exciting work in the fruit and nut space, which is why you're here today. I've also got Madison and Talia here from our team, so they'll be typing away in the chat. Talia is our project manager for the Orchard Resilience Project. So if you have any questions about our project, which I'll share shortly, you can reach out to Talia and she can provide her details in the chat at some point. And Madison is our research and engagement officer. Before we kick off, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm standing on Bangarang country here today in northeast Victoria, and that Soils for Life acknowledges the traditional custodians of Australia and their continuing connection to land, sea, environment, water, and community. And we pay our respect to the traditional custodians, their culture, and elders past and present. We recognise and value Indigenous knowledge systems and the imperative to listen to and work with traditional owners as we collectively learn how to heal country. In our Orchard Resilience project, we're actually working with native foodways, which is a really exciting part of our Orchard Resilience project. So I'm looking forward to sharing more about that with you through our newsletter and through the project more broadly. Oops, sorry. Orchard Resilience is obviously about supporting fruit and nut growers to build soil health and climate resilience. It's funded through the Australian government through funding from the Climate Smart Agriculture program under the Natural Heritage Trust. And we're working with a bunch of amazing partners across Australia, NRM and Landcare kind of groups across Australia. What this project looks like is quite varied. We're running events like today's, like webinars and field days, but we're also setting up some demonstration sites with some amazing growers across Australia and developing some practice guides and resources. So if, this is a relatively new industry for us, so we'd love to hear from you if you have anything that you'd like to share. If you've been producing fruit and nuts and you've got some experiences that you think we should know about, please reach out. So as you would have seen when you registered for this convo, we've got a couple of other convos coming up. One on beneficial insects with Dr. Paul Horn and Rebecca Addison. We're speaking with Dean Metcalf on biological controls and Abigail Makem on biodiversity and interrow management. So you can sign up for those via the link in the chat. So today I'll introduce Darren and Campbell in a second, but just in case you haven't been to one of our Convo webinars before, the format is we have like a short presentation from a farmer or a specialist in a particular field, and then we have a facilitated Q&A to follow that. So it's heavier on the Q&A and less on the lecture. So if you have any questions while Darren and Campbell are talking, feel free to throw them in the chat. Or you can just leave it for when we have the Q&A later. As I said, we'll be staying on mute, but during the Q&A, I can invite you to chat to provide a bit more context around your question. This is one of our longer convos, so we'll be wrapping up at about 1:25. And we'll have a short survey to share. I've already kind of been through the housekeeping, but the main kind of thing that we ask here is please be respectful, whether that's asking questions or giving advice. Please be respectful of everyone's different contexts and different backgrounds. So, oops. I'll stop sharing and I'll hand over to Darren. But while you're setting up, Darren, I'll introduce you and Campbell. And if you missed the intro at the start, please let us know where you're coming in from in the chat. And if you're a grower, let us know what you're growing. We'd love to hear about who's in the room. Um, are you okay, Darren, to start setting that up? Is that all good on your end?
Absolutely.
Great. So Darren is a farm planner and a founder of Regrarians, and he's the creator of the Regrarians platform, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard about, a comprehensive agroecological landscape enterprise and training framework. So Darren has worked with tens of thousands of people worldwide, playing a key role in design and planning for a range of farming systems, including orchards. And he lives and works with his family on Judja Warren country in Victoria. And before we kick off with you, Darren, just quickly for Campbell. Campbell is the owner and operator, Campbell Mercer is the owner and operator of Manor Hill Estate in Mount Egerton in the Central Highlands in Victoria. So this is a dry range, 2,500 tree olive grove. We've worked with Campbell before. We know that he's passionate about improving soil health and enhancing landscape function. And Manor Hill Grove was established in 2002 and it's now certified organic, biodynamic, and certified regenerative, which I think is the first olive grove in the world, which is amazing. Um, so thank you, Campbell, and thank you, Darren, for joining us today. I'll hand over to you. And please forgive me, everyone, if I have to cut Darren and Campbell off at some point, but we really do want to prioritize questions today. So you've all been warned. I'll hand it over to you, Darren.
Okay. Well, I better change my clock from an hour and 15 to 15. Anyway, that'll be good enough. Thank you so much, everyone, and thanks for having us join this convo. So let's get straight into it. Hopefully this will work. There we go. So we have a thing called the Regrarians Oh, wow. This reformatting has played havoc with my slides. So we have a thing called the Regrarians platform, which are 10 planning layers based on the 1958 Yeoman's or PA Yeoman's keyline scale of relative permanence of all things agricultural, also known as the keyline scale of permanence. So these are planning layers that we build our whole pedagogy around and all of our trainings and all the rest of it. The first of which is the climate layer. So that's one where we're looking at the not only the meteorological climate, but the climate of you and what you want to do and what you're trying to achieve and all the rest of it. And we fundamentally base the questions around you and your context using the holistic management framework, which many of you would be familiar with. And if you're not, then perhaps you could. And within that, we have a checklist of sort of looking at, where you're at and is it the right time for you if you're starting out with all of this, looking at legislation, weather conditions, all of that sort of thing that we consider with climate. Geography is where we're looking at the landforms that you're working with and land capability and where you are situated according to markets and all of that, especially now that so many people are looking to improve their terms of trade by doing direct to consumer marketing. So within that, in the mapping stuff, we provide a whole lot of resources for people to develop their maps, whether it's our base map service or our new farm planning software, which we're launching hopefully in July, which is farm planning software designed by farm planners with enormous precision. And we're really proud of that, and it's going to be very, very helpful to a whole bunch of people in this space. When we look at the water layer, this is fundamentally for orchardists about reticulation. What storages of water you have, or sources and storages, and then how you get it about. But also how one might treat water and how one deals with fire. A lot of orchards are in a lot of fire-prone areas, including here in central Victoria with the Harcourt fires, which damaged and destroyed a number of apple and pear and grapevine vineyards here. The water supply and needs is we look at what quantity of which quality of water do you need. And in our Agrarian's Handbook, in the water chapter, We use various methods to help people plan how much water they'll need, and the crop factor method is one. A lot of integrated farms need to also consider all of the other uses of water that they might have across their holding. So there's a number of different ways that we consider that. Within the access layer, access is a critical layer, particularly for orchards, but for all farms. It's one of the comments that we often get is, wow, we never considered access as much as we could have. And access is a point source of erosion in a lot of places. A lot of roads were A to B roads. They don't consider contours or contour alignments or their power in terms of being able to control water in the landscape. So we spent a lot of time analysing the landscape, looking at where the best places for optimising access positioning. But then we also spent a lot of time trying to work out what's the optimised headland and row offsets that we have according to machinery. A lot of people are getting more and more mechanised with agriculture, particularly in orchardry, and as a result, it's really important to start to model all of this out, and modern CAD software and our own allows you to do that. The ecosystems layer is probably the real DNA of what we're talking about here today, and that's this layer we originally labelled the forestry layer, and then it was the agroforestry layer, and now it's the ecosystems layer. So it's basically dealing with all of the integration of the varying living systems into a farm, and the different layouts that that has, and the types of species that will contend with, and all of the rest of it, all of the capability of species with the capability of the landscape, and matching that out. And when it comes to whichever species you're looking at, how they fit into the landscape as a whole. The buildings layer is where we're looking at all of the building design, not only of fixed buildings, but in this era, thanks in particular to the Salatin family, of portable infrastructure and what that looks like. And now a lot of people are talking about, again, trying to arrest the poor terms of trade in agriculture by having on-farm processing, particularly in the meat sector, something that people in the orchard sector have done for a long time. But, if you are looking at doing trees into new landscapes and you have livestock, well, then there's lots of temporary ways, even within new orchards. And we're dealing with a lot of systems where we're trying to integrate, as Campbell will discuss as well, integrate livestock into orchard operations. And how do we manage that? Which takes us to fencing. We haven't quite worked out a virtual fencing system that can work within orchards, but there's a bunch of different fencing systems that we have worked with. Again, Campbell can talk about some of his experiments with sheep on that front. Now, this is a Soils for Life presentation, so there's a lot to go on with here in terms of what we call planned grazing and cropping, or planned grazing and cultivation, and how this is all managed in the agronomy of a landscape, and considering how a system fundamentally operates from a nutrient cycling perspective, and the kind of orchards that we're running, we're not reliant so much on external inputs as much as on management. And so understanding how different plants and organisms cycle carbon, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and all the rest of it is very, very important, and what methods that we will use in order to, and tools and treatments that we will use in order to maximize, particularly as a starting point, the levels of organic carbon and soil biology that we might have through the use of cover crops and so on. The economy layer is where we're looking at all of the value chain and how we actually manage that. So planning, the analysis of the economy that we have, because so many of you now, when you generate your direct-to-consumer marketing strategies, are doing things like this. You're going off to the embroiderers and getting an embroidery patch put on your nice shirts, and developing all that goes with that. But then all the products that you might have, and all of the costings, and trying to do the best you can as far as all of that is concerned. And that then goes into how we're going to set up the budgets for the reticulation systems that we've got, how we might look at all of the establishment budgets that we've got, and using software like Overyield, which is from our friends at Propagate, who we have been long-time advisors to actually start to really, really get into the nitty-gritty of the returns on investment, not just from the products that you're producing, but also potentially from environmental services that you may well provide as a benefit byproduct of your operation. That then takes us to energy. And when we're looking at energy, this current period where we're trying to work out if there's another Gulf of Hormuz incident, which we're still in the middle of, and all of the peaks that are around us, how are we going to deal with that? But also, how do we extend photosynthesis for the longest period possible? As Dr. Christine Jones said, how do we have year-round green farming? How do we keep those sugars pumping into the soil and keeping the soil economy, soil microlife alive? But then also looking at the different energy generation, storage options, and so on. And also, how do we keep ourselves well through nutrition? And, thinking about all of this in terms of how we actually cycle biomass on our whole farm and what that's going to look like and so on. So I'm going to hand over to Campbell now. And so this is a photo that I took in 2016. I was really lucky to meet Campbell. I think it was in 2000. I can't even remember where. But Campbell and I have been working for a long time. And this is a great example of a property which we designed, and then somehow it got printed onto he and Julie's landscape. So over to you, Campbell.
Great. Thank you very much, Darren. And as the picture shows, we have olives, agroforestry, and sheep. Sheep only from time to time, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through it. Next slide, Darren.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so as Courtney said, we have about 2,500 trees. It is a dryland grove, so yeah, we don't have any irrigation. And so we also have agroforestry, which is mixed species and sheep from time to time. We planted the olive trees in 2002, which is right at the start of the millennium drought, which is probably not ideal, particularly if you can't irrigate. So first commercial crop wasn't in 2012. Certifications, so we're certified organic and have been since 2004, originally with NASA, which is now defunct, and now with Southern Cross certifiers. Similarly, biodynamic, that was relatively recently, and regenerative, which we're part of a global pilot program with the global certifier AGW. So we were one of 79 farms across the globe, and we were the only one from Australia and New Zealand. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, here we go. Resilience. So just a quick definition: the capacity of agricultural systems to withstand and adapt to various stresses such as extreme weather, pests, diseases, and economic fluctuations. I won't talk about economic fluctuations further through the talk, but as Darren indicated in his economy section, it's really critical for farmers to understand how to build that resilience on a financial basis, and thinking about what your unique selling proposition is, and how you might leverage it or monetize that into the marketplace. A few stresses, just like any farmer, we've had a few. So the grove was planted at the start of the millennium drought. We had a hailstorm in 2016, which wiped out our crop. In 2022, we had two 1-in-100-year wind events within 6 weeks of each other. Wind speed clocked out at 146 kilometres an hour, so pretty breezy. 2023, we had rain for 10 days of our 2-week pollination period. So it reduced the fruit set by 80%. That's pretty standard for olives. They need a dry climate to pollinate. And in 2023, because it was like wet during the summer, we had fungal outbreaks and persistent humidity, which is not great, particularly for olives, but a lot of horticultural produce. And yeah, in the last 2 years, it's been as dry as any period during the millennium drought. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few years. Just in terms of key focus areas for resilience, so wind management was something that, in terms of the design, Darren put together. So we're planted on north-facing slopes, and so our extreme winds tend to come from the south. So, we've actually got the bulk of the land actually protecting the olive grove. But in addition to that, we have shelter belts and agroforestry areas, which are located in more wind-prone areas. And as a result, during those extreme windstorms that we had, we only lost one olive tree and a few agroforestry trees. So given the severity of the windstorm, it was a pretty good outcome for us. Frost management is another key issue. It gets pretty cold here in central Victoria. We're pretty high. We're at 540 metres. So again, the grove design, planting on the warmer north-facing slopes. You can do a lot with grove maintenance. So you have a low grass sward during frost periods so that if you're on a slope, the frost can flow down the slope unimpeded and it tends not to get up into the trees. Soil microbial diversity, I'll talk a little bit more about this, can lower the frost point and improve plant stress capability. So your rhizo bacteria can reduce the frost point by 5 to 6 degrees, which is very significant. And so you often see when you're driving along a road on a frosty morning, one paddock will be completely frosted and the one next to it doesn't appear to have any frost. And you sort of say, oh, why would that be? And it's most likely the soil bacteria. Also foliar sprays. So seaweed is great for strengthening cell walls and reducing frost and in fact heat damage. So a really good foliar to think about. Water management, huge component for any Australian farmer. Grove design can make a big difference in terms of how you can trap that water. So it's based on keyline principles, and you'll see that none of the rows are perfectly straight. They curve around the hillside, and so keyline is just off contour, so that you're never going to get water rushing straight down the hill. It's going to get to the next row and then just slowly infiltrate along the row. And depending on, so soil health is a key component. So there's really two pieces to that. There's infiltration, so getting the water into the soil, and then there's the capacity to hold water. So those are the two critical components associated with soil health. And depending on scale, if you're a large enough property and you can increase the small water cycle through tree plantings. And, I guess Phil Mulvey in his recent book talks about that. He talks about square clouds. So clouds that basically form over areas where there is significant vegetation. So there's a number of things you can do in terms of resilience around water management. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about soil health. So key focus area, soil health is huge, something I'm absolutely passionate about. Our starting point is, as you can see from the graph, this is based on available nutrients. I would now just go to total nutrients. But so we have Ordovician soils, which are really, really old, like they're about 500 million years old. So yeah, very low in phosphorus, low in nutrients, low in just about everything, as you can see from the graph, except high in some of the heavy metals. So iron is really high there. And you can see from the soil pH, very, very acidic. So our soil organic matter was around 2.9, so your soil carbon's about 1.4%. And that's pretty consistent for grazing country. Grazing country is typically 2 to 3% soil organic matter historically, and cropping systems typically between 0.5% and 2%. So very, very low soil organic matter. Very, very shallow topsoil and poor plant diversity. So what have we done? So we keep the soil covered 100% of the time. So that's critical for a couple of reasons. One is it ensures that you don't have bare soil. Bare soil in summer gets very, very hot. And so, and you end up with a lot of evaporation as a result. The other big issue is that the soil, when it gets that hot, is that your soil microbiology starts dying at around 40 degrees, and pretty much it's all dead at 60 degrees. So on a warmish day at 30 degrees, if you measure the temperature of your soil, a bare soil, it will typically be around 60 degrees. Typically it's double. And so if you have, if you're higher than that, then, if you're up around 40 degrees, then your soil temperature on bare soil is going to be up around 80 degrees C. So everything is being nuked at the surface, and it just depends on how deep that's going to go in terms of nuking that microbiology. So, so keeping your soil covered at all times. Next slide, if you could, Darren. Yeah. Keeping living roots in the soil. So our job as farmers is to convert sunlight into that sunlight energy into energy that we can use. And you do that through having living roots in the soil. So if you're an orchard, yep, that's your trees, but also you can gather a lot of carbon via the sward that you have between your trees. So huge opportunity there. We minimise disturbance. We don't use any of the sides, herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, etc. We're certified organic. Don't use any synthetic fertilisers. We don't till. We enhance biodiversity. We use multi-species covers a lot. We have multi-species shelter belts. Our agroforestry is multi-species as well. We use biochar, which we make from our agroforestry and our prunings. We use biological products a fair bit. Compost, not so much anymore. Compost teas, again, not so much anymore. We typically use compost extracts, the Johnson-Su methodology, which basically uses wood chips. Takes it a lot longer, but you get a fungal-dominated compost extract. The reason we don't use teas, by the way, is they typically can go from aerobic to anaerobic in about 20 minutes. And if you've mixed up a brew, by the time you've got it into your tank and the time you've driven down the paddock and start spraying it, it potentially has gone from aerobic to anaerobic. Extracts are much, much friendlier. You can have an extract sit around for a couple of days before you spray it. So that time urgency isn't there. And from our personal experience, I'm not sure there's a huge difference. Vermicast extract, yep, so we use worm juice, some we make ourselves, some we buy in. Biodynamic 500s, that's the biodynamic product, which essentially is just a compost extract made up slightly differently. Kelp, fish hydrolysis we use a fair bit of. Lactobacillus cultures we use, which we make ourselves, and other stuff which we make ourselves as well. Integrate animals, so sheep, we've had a fair bit of experience with. We had poultry for a short while. I actually think for an orchard, poultry is probably the best option for a number of reasons. And I would love to try kuni pigs. They are grass-eating pigs and are used a lot in vineyards in New Zealand, but not available in Australia. Next chart. So the results, we've taken our soil pH from 4.6 to 6.8. And most of you be aware that pH is a logarithmic scale, and I'll touch on that a bit later. Soil organic matter, we've taken from 2.9% to 7.8%. Depth of the soil, we've increased significantly. We've increased our ecological biodiversity. We do that via bird species. Birds are a very, very good indicator of biodiversity. And when we first got here, there were 54 species, and we've got about 86 now. Soil biodiversity, so we use a microbiometer to measure fungal to bacteria ratio. And particularly for orchardists, we want a fungal dominated soil. And so measuring that and seeing what works for you and trying to move the dial in terms of creating a fungal dominated soil is really, really important. We also do DNA analysis on our soil, which tells us how we're going versus the global databases. Next chart. Okay, improvements in soil depth. So on the left there, you can see that there's a faint B horizon. You know, if you're really generous, you'd say there's nearly 100 mil of topsoil. So that's what we had at the start. And the shovel full on the left, on the right, is what we've got today. Is that we've got, you know, at least 300 mil of pretty good topsoil. Very lots of carbon. And so, yeah, it just makes a huge difference to the productivity of the grove. Moving on, improvements in biodiversity. So the photo on the left is actually one that Darren took, and it shows that we had basically two species. The lovely yellow there is capeweed. The other thing that we had was bent grass. So yeah, basically the previous owner has used set stocking, which is guaranteed to reduce your biodiversity down to one or two plants that they don't like. And on the right is what it looks like today. So we're pretty much, you know, a huge amount of biodiversity, a lot of different grass species, so perennials, plus we do put some annuals in, and yeah, just the tree life has really made a huge difference.
Campbell, we just have a question from Tam that's relevant to that slide. It looks like that first photo is 2001, and then the second photo was taken in what year?
2016.
Fantastic. Does that answer your question, Tam?
Okay. Okay, improvements in soil microbial activity. I talked about why it's important to try and increase your fungal concentration. So we look at the fungal to bacteria ratio. So on the left there, you can see that our fungal bacteria ratio is quite low. So 20% fungi to 80% bacteria, and also our total carbon count was quite low with 236 micrograms of carbon per gram, versus on the right, which is in 2023. So we've now got our fungal ratio up above the bacteria, which is great. You know, having that ratio at between 1 and 2 to 1 is where you'd be good to go. A rainforest, just to put that in perspective, is at about 1,000 to 1. So, you know, that's really fungal dominated. Whereas, yeah, desert grassland tends to be about 1,001 the other way. And you can also see that the soil carbon has increased very, very significantly. And that's getting up towards the bottom end of the compost scale. Compost starts at about 800 micrograms of carbon per gram. So, you know, we've moved the soil a huge amount over the last few years. Okay, water infiltration. Yeah, we're getting less water, more higher intensity rainfall when we do get it. So water infiltration becomes really, really critical. So quite low. Originally, we've now got it up to, on this particular block, up around 450 millimeters per hour. Some of our blocks are up over 1,000 millimeters per hour. So, you know, if you're getting some of those really intense thunderstorms, There was one a few years back. We just got the edge of it. It dumped 200 and farm up the road, got 220 millimeters in about 20 minutes. So, that's basically, getting up around 700 millimeters per hour water infiltration. They didn't have that. They're a potato farmer, and they had some ploughed paddocks, and just a lot of their topsoil just washed down, took out fences, roads, everything. So a real mess. But if your soil can hold that water, then it makes a huge amount of difference. Okay, pH, focusing on soil biology. So way back in 2001, our pH was around 4.6. We did what everyone said you should do, which is add 2 tonne per hectare of lime every year forever. And we did that for about 3 years. And I thought, this is a bit of a mug's game, because pH is a logarithmic scale. So to go from 5 to 6 is a factor of 10. To go to 5 to 7 is a factor of 100. So it's almost like, well, we've got to put 100 times this amount on. This is a mug's game. So, and you run out of money, amongst other things. So we tried a whole lot of different biological approaches, and in about 2017 really started to take off. So we introduced animals. We were doing a lot of compost extracts and teas, and we also started with our multi-species cropping. And I can't tell you and point at one particular element, but it all started to come together, and with a focus on soil biology, the pH really started to come up. We're now at about 6.8, which, it's balanced at 7. Albrecht would say the optimum is around 6.4 in terms of nutrient uptake. But, we're pretty happy with where that's at, and done totally with soil biology. There's, I doubt that we could have added enough lime to be able to have achieved that. Okay.
Thank you so much, Campbell, and thank you, Darren. So start typing your questions in. We'll start from the top. And if you like, when you're typing your question, if you wanted to address it specifically to Darren or Campbell, feel free. Otherwise, Darren and Campbell can fight for the mic. Why and how does soil microbial population reduce frost? This was an earlier question.
Yeah, so that's the rhizobacteria. They produce a protein which essentially absorbs the ice as it starts to form, and it stops it from going any further. So that's my understanding of how rhizobacteria actually prevent frost from forming. Maybe you can add something to that, Darren?
No, that's about it. I mean, the other thing is just increasing soil temperatures by soils darkening, which you clearly saw. So there's that. But also just you have a lot more biology in a soil. It's a lot of sex going on, and we won't get into all of that. But apart from that, it's also it's just a lot of bodies which are alive and operating, living at ambient temperatures. So the soil temperature actually increases as a result of having higher levels of biology, which is something even P.A. Yeomans was pointing out in the 50s in his books about the noticing that frosts weren't settling, but he didn't mention the rhizobacteria as well.
Yeah, and I imagine that, if you've got a functioning soil microbial community, you have healthier plants that potentially have higher bricks and more resilient to frost too.
Yep.
From Robin, how deep down does the temperature go on bare soil? I guess that depends where you measure the temperature. Do you have a response to that?
I personally don't. Apart from what we have seen with fire, we've buried a lot. We do a lot of pipe laying, and we have seen in intense fires in bushland that the 30 centimetre deep pipes have been affected, but we haven't seen anywhere near the same implications from bare soil with pipes that are buried. So I've never measured to see how deep, to be honest. So don't know on that one. Campbell?
Yeah, it's a good question, but it's talking about context. The amount of soil organic matter that you had and the amount of air that you have increases the insulation capability of your soil. So, you think about sand at the beach, which has got neither of those. You can put your hand on a really hot day, it's almost too hot to walk on, and it actually goes down a reasonable distance in terms of that heat. But you move to an agricultural situation where hopefully you have a lot of organic matter, you'll have lots of air in there, and that provides that insulation layer. So, although if you've got bare soil, maybe you don't have some of those things. But and the other thing to keep in mind is that a lot of your activity, even for trees, is happening in that top couple of inches or top 50 mil of soil. That's where all the activity is happening. It's where the oxygen is. It's where a lot of your microbial activity is, and so that's where your roots are really pulling a lot of your nutrients from. So if on a really hot day on bare soil, you're killing a lot of that life.
Great responses. From Al, I'm going to mispronounce your name, I'm so sorry. I have two ongoing battles, pear slug and fungal infections. Oops, sorry, I've just lost it. Mainly on stoned fruit. Any ideas? I'd like not to spray, but my trees and fruit are suffering. And I mean, obviously, we can't provide specific advice from a one sentence question. So maybe it's more about questions to ask, things to look into. Campbell or Darren, do you have anything to respond to there?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is that some of the things that I've tried, because there's a lot of things that aren't available to a biological grower in terms of nasty sprays, which I sort of see as a good thing. I use lactic acid bacteria, and it's not the lactic acid bacteria that actually do the job. It's really some of that they get onto the leaves, and then that interacts with the biology on the leaves, and some of those waste products, the byproducts from that interaction, that actually provides a lot of the protection. So because those byproducts are also alive, and they create some resistance to some of those things. And another thing that's worth trying if you haven't already is trichoderma, which is a bacteria. And again, it has a similar pathway, is that it doesn't affect things directly. It's normally through the byproducts associated with the interaction with the plant and trichoderma that provides some sort of fungal protection. At least that's what I've found in my context.
Okay, from Peter. I mean, feel free to jump in, Al, if that didn't cover your question. From Pete, any insights to soil algae effects in orchards?
No. Darren, you got any thoughts on that? No.
No. Probably like to hear more about it. Could I just with Al's question too, the role I mean, we're often looking at when we're looking at bugs in particular, trying to unravel the life cycle of those organisms. So, if you've got an animal that's got some time on the ground, then what can we do with integrated pest management? You mentioned before, Campbell, using some form of poultry, when poultry have long had a role in breaking animal cycles, or sorry, bug cycles, at strategic times. It's just a matter of whether that fits your context. And the other thing I'd add to with fungi is also canopy maintenance and the way that you lay the system out so that you can afford enough airflow through a system. I think what we're seeing is especially with really intensive orchards, which have become more in vogue more recently, that can be a challenge. But of course, the corollary of that is that a lot of those systems are quite chemical dependent. So that's how one overcomes that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Pete from Friendly Farms, did you want to come off mute and explain your question in a little bit more detail, or what soil algae is looking like in your context?
Well, I don't know yet either, but it's just I put a link to an article about this. It's really sparked some thinking. From my perspective, we talk a lot about bacteria and fungal, but having the algae aspect coming into play as well, and there's some interesting new studies coming out around that. And so, yeah, I was just curious to see if there's any thinking at this stage. Yeah.
Mm.
So question, not answer from me.
Yeah, fascinating. Thank you for sharing. Darren, you're still sharing your screen, which is fine, but maybe we could turn it off and then we can
No, no
just
worries at all. All right, happy to.
continue.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Where are we up to now? We are up to Fiona. What trace elements did you use, Campbell? I mean, I guess that's specific to your context, right? So it might not be something relevant to
Yeah.
Fiona.
The interestingly, and some of the soil scientists will actually say this. If you put the available soil nutrients test that most people get to one side and look at total, so you're just looking at total nutrients in the soil, despite the fact that Australian soils are really, really nutrient poor, nearly all of them have sufficient nutrients to grow most of the things we want to grow. It's just that it's not available. Now, there were a couple of exceptions on my place. Boron is borderline, and zinc likewise. So I do actually add as a foliar spray. Foliar sprays are about 15 to 30 times more effective than a soil spray in terms of getting it into the tree. And particularly until you get your soil really working, I'm a big proponent of foliar sprays. So I do tend to do a foliar spray just before flowering for boron in particular, and yeah, zinc if I need it.
Yeah, fantastic.
How could I add to that? And also with a question to Campbell, so geological assays are usually what one is looking at there. It used to be back in the day, well, back when I think I did the soil test for you, Campbell, I think we used ProAg in Adelaide, which was as a result of Neil Kinsey's visits here in the late 90s. That's now, I think, it's one of, like most labs except for EAL in Lismore, has been taken over by one of the big European giants. But
Yeah.
the only test that generally could be done there was total phosphorus. And, so there's a legacy, a lot of properties have got a legacy of, we've had the sub and super revolution going on across Australia for the better part of 80 years. And so there's a legacy of phosphorus there, but most of it's unavailable because phosphorus becomes unavailable once you get below about 5.8 pH. So that's part of it. And John Kemp talks about this a lot in terms of, his starting point with the soil journey is to do a geological assay, because as we know now, we can target different or grow different cover crop species, which will then host a bunch of different rhizobacteria, and the rhizo deposition of those plants will unlock and make available plant nutrients which currently are not, as well as of course the standard. Let's change the pH, right? Because that stuff works. But who were you getting to get to do the assays for you, Campbell?
Yeah, I was using EAL, and I now use the guys in Tasmania, independent. The name will come to me in a moment.
No worries. Sorry to put you on the spot.
But yeah, they're based down in Tassie, and their focus is horticulture.
Right.
So I also use them for all my sap tests. So I do that about 4 to 6 times a year, just to find out how the trees are going and whether in fact I need to get out and spray something.
Yeah.
That would be AgVita Lab, is that
Agvita,
right?
thank you very much, Courtney. Yeah, no, Agvita, and they're fantastic. Like they turn it around in 24 hours.
Wow.
Mm.
Very, very responsive,
Wow.
economic, great. It's my personal experience.
Good to know.
Mm. Thank you. There was a specific question about the distance between your rows, Campbell, but maybe if you both wanted to talk about row distances more broadly and any principles there.
Yeah, probably better for Darren to talk about the principles.
Yeah, I think I put in there, if I remember correctly, the olives. So the standard olive spacing back in the day was because the whole push back in the late 90s with the rise of the olive industry at that time was to mechanize olive production by the use of shakers, and they based the row spacing of 8 meters off the use of shakers in California, in the Central Valley of California. So we sort of took that model and brought it over here, and the 5 meters was for irrigated, and the 6 meters, 6 meter tree spacing was for unirrigated trees. So we took the opinion at the time that 8 by 5 would be a good spacing given the higher rainfall that Campbell had, as opposed to say Northern Victoria, where a lot of olives were being put in, and so on. And the tree spacing in the agroforestry, if I remember, was 4 meter row spacing by 3 meter tree spacing.
Yep.
812 or 15 trees per hectare. Olives are about 250 per hectare. That was a pretty standard, let's say, farm forestry spacing that was, I think, is still reasonable for a lot of places. I like the 4 meter spacing for tree rows as opposed to 3 because, as I discovered early in my career, there's this phenomena about trees actually growing. And when you go and practically run a tractor, as I found on a planting I did I think I did a planting in about 1996, and I came back a few years later, and well, the tree grew, so it wasn't a 3 meter row anymore. It was more like a 2.6 or something. So
Yeah.
yeah, you've got that. You've got a bit more space. There's that airflow, the potential for more light penetration for doing different things. But orchards themselves. Wow, it's a big question because so many people now are so many people now are into high density, and I get that because orchard land is really expensive, labor is hard to access, so there's all of these sort of factors that are pushing people in a particular direction as
Mm.
a result, and so spacing is really, if you're in that play, then spacing is really around machinery use and trying to get the optimum density for light penetration and management. I know one of our clients and colleagues in Catalonia, Francesc Font, who also runs the Regen Academy. He has all of his olives, all of his almonds, and all of his vineyards are all mechanically harvested. So he uses a grape harvester to manage the 3 crops because he just can't get reliable labor. So, and he manages that. I think they're like 3 meter row spacings, if I remember correctly. And he still runs cover crops in between, runs sheep in between, and all the rest of it. So, he's an ardent organic regen sort of guy. So, yeah, there's lots of different factors there.
Mhm. Great, thank you. I'm going to start prioritizing some questions over others, but hopefully we'll have time to answer all of them. Are there any reference books or guides you'd recommend to folks new to orchards? You mentioned holistic management. Was that you, Darren?
Yeah, I would have mentioned that. Yeah, so holistic management as a framework, I think, is a great framework for any human, let alone any land manager. And it's particularly geared towards that. And as Campbell would appreciate as well, recommends, as so many of us do, about the reintegration of livestock into agricultural landscapes where they've been absent, which orchards have historically had livestock integrated, whether they're poultry or species like sheep and goats and so on, particularly sheep. Yeah, so that also helps to have you understand about how one manages the rules of grazing and recovery and all of that sort of thing with grazing planning. So that's where that mostly goes. Do you have any fave books on orchard development and management, Campbell?
Not particularly, although, and unfortunately I can't think of the name of it. There's quite a good book on apples out of the US, and again, the principles consistent across all horticulture. And I've Gabe Brown's book on soil. I know it's not specific to horticulture per se, but I just think it's a great readable book, and really talks about the benefits that Gabe found in increasing soil carbon using animals. And I think a lot of those principles are really, really good to be able to get into. I think he's got his soil carbon up to, his organic matter up to about 14%. And so, again, it's like we're on a journey. We're only at 8%. So I'd like to think that we could keep going in terms of soil carbon.
I don't think that there's much in the library as far as sort of holistic. Well, if there's books on tree growing or orchards, it's mostly about, you'd say like homesteader sort of style stuff as opposed to, commercial production, I would say. Not that
There's
that's,
a new
yeah.
there's a new project for you and Campbell. You can be co-authors.
Oof.
Expanding on that livestock integration piece, from Tam Campbell, you mentioned chickens were preferable in the orchard. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, so I've run sheep. I don't have sheep on the property at the moment because we don't have water. Carting water for livestock is a mug's game, in my humble opinion. So so we don't have sheep on the place at the moment. So I've had them for 2 stints, one for 5 years, one for 3 years. We ran wilty poles, which don't require shearing, so they're self-shedding sheep. And the first batch I had, and they reproduced, and I got up to about 100 sheep wandering around. They didn't touch the olive trees in terms of the bark at all. So 5 years, anyone asked me about it, yep, wilty poles are fantastic. Put them into your orchard and they'll keep everything lovely and clean. They even hem your trees because they will eat the leaves. Said they're fantastic. Then we got a drought. I had to get rid of them. And then I just bought some more wilty poles. And within about 20 minutes, they started ring barking the first tree. So, whenever someone says, "Oh, okay, this particular breed or that particular breed is fantastic. They won't ring bark your trees," I tend to take it with a high dose of skepticism. And I was talking to an apple orchard grower in South Australia, and he does run sheep. And he says as soon as he sees a sheep starting to nibble on the bark of a tree, it's off to the abattoirs with it. So second time round, I did have them for 3 years. So I had to use electric fencing. So it's pretty easy to train sheep to electric fencing. So I used a 3-wire electric fence up and down the rows. Not nearly so convenient, very management intensive. And, the reality is you're not producing thousands of sheep. And so the amount of management and time you're putting into it, the soil health benefits you get versus, the income that you're going to derive from it, was really difficult for me to see how that was sustainable. So when we get some more water, I will think about possibly using sheep tractors. So that's like huge pen that you just move along. And that way you just move it with a UTV or an ATV or something like that. And so, and have a relatively small number of sheep and have a number of those and just move them around the grove. And that way you don't have to worry about setting up and pulling down electric fences. So, that's probably one thing I'll try. I'm also put the word out there locally. Is there any young farmers who want to start a poultry operation? Because a grove or an orchard is a fantastic opportunity for some other farmer. Young people who want to get into the business, and land is so expensive. And so basically you could almost give them the land for nothing and say, okay, let's have a peppercorn rental, and you just run your chooks around the place, move them when we need to have them moved for harvesting, etc. So I think we just need to think differently about animal integration. I think it's terribly important. There's no ecosystem on Earth that doesn't have animals. So I think animals are really important, and they really boost your soil in ways in which you can't imagine. There's other advantages with it as well. So I just, in terms of, I think I can get sheep to work. But if you can find someone who wants to run poultry for you, I would go with that first. It's probably easier.
Good points. From Pete, we were told to avoid using post-press crushed oil olives in our grove due to potential bacteria contamination. Do you have any recommendations along these lines? Have you
I would just compost it first if you're really concerned about that. It's actually because of the oil content, it's actually quite difficult to compost. So you need to mix it with other organic matter to get it to compost. Otherwise, it'll just sit there because bacteria can't live in pure olive oil, which makes it a really safe product, but also makes it difficult to break down. So you really need to mix it with other things in order for it to compost really well. It does produce fantastic compost, but it's not just a matter of piling it up into a heap and saying she'll be right, because it won't.
From Martin, any special considerations for layouts of orchards on a ridge regarding wind, water, infiltration, nutrient leaching? Martin, feel free to come off mute if you wanted to add more context.
It's just, squaring that circle of row orientation with solar access and all of this. I just saw that Campbell's orchard was on a kind of on a ridge or on a hilltop. So I thought it's probably worth asking what was behind the choice of row orientation and layout.
Thanks, Martin, and hello. We've probably talked a bit about this on Regrarians from time to time, but back then, the main reason why I chose the layout that I put forward was to Campbell, and which we then put in was to, one, to have a contour style of layout, and that's where keyline is really good, because keyline provides you the opportunity to not only have the rows, the gradient of the rows angled towards the center line of the ridge, as opposed to anything else, but also because keyline geometry allows you to have equidistance between the rows, whereas no two contours are equidistant. So I mean they're level, but they're not equidistant. And to get the maximum crop coverage over an area, that's a big consideration. The majority of the rows that are on Campbell's hillside are east-west facing, and it is in the Australian context, what are you at 37 degrees of latitude or 38 or whatever, pretty close. The sun never gets really that low in the sky to be of significant concern for the people I work with in the United States or the northern parts of the US and Europe and so on, and to a degree on the South Island of New Zealand, where you're below 40 or 45 degrees of latitude, then sun angle really starts to play into things. We sometimes play with it too. Just last week, I was talking with a person in Kenya who's at 0 degrees of latitude, but in the high tropics. They're at 2,500 meters above sea level, so it's quite a temperate environment. And in that case, we're actually going to angle the rows so they're more or less north-south. because we want to have a lot of solar access, even though it's equatorial. So, but if you are in the true tropics, or on the lower tropics at 0 degrees of latitude, you may well change the orientation again. So it is and I know you're up in northern New South Wales, well, last time I spoke to you, so you're in that sort of position where you're kind of trying to balance water harvesting, and because you've got a prolonged dry season, you're trying to balance getting good airflow. So part of that, I think, too, is the spacing that you have between the trees so that you can get, which I would say the same as for Campbell. It's not the densest of plantings. He's done a lot of canopy maintenance to allow light penetration through, but then also trying to get it so that the water is held on the site, which I think has probably been the main factor. Which I would finish with saying that there's a whole bunch of competing factors when you're deciding on orientation of trees, integration, regardless of what they are, and whether it's water capture, whether it's light infiltration, whether it's trying to get, solar access, or whether it's air movement. And it's kind of a game of where you're trying to pick which of those are the most dominant factors or dominant limitations that you then will then help you to decide which you'll go with. So, like if you look at a lot of orchards in the northern hemisphere, they're basically up and down the slope because cold is such a dominant limiting factor. So solar access and air drainage are what you're going for there by having that up and down the slope sort of orientation. So it's a fun one.
Is that helpful, Martin? Did you have anything else you needed to follow up there? All good. From Bronwyn, interested in what can be done in orchards between rows and under trees without disturbing the roots. I guess that's
Yeah.
a big topic. Campbell?
Yeah, it is a big topic. So, I plant multi-species covers between the rows, and I direct drill that. So very, very little disturbance, and I'm going down less than 50 mil. So you really I'm not picking up olive roots at those sort of depths, and you're only doing a relatively. So it's not as if I'm running a deep ripper through it. It's you're really just tickling the surface to get the seed in. Grass seeds don't need a whole lot of depth. Clovers and stuff you can just about get away with spreading on the surface. And so we're just essentially direct drilling very small seed, and haven't had an issue in terms of picking up any roots from any of the trees. We're just not going deep enough.
And you've got a really dense sod as well, which is part of that. I remember using our machine there. We've got a disc plow, a disc seeder that runs behind a keyline plow, and it didn't work too well at your place because your sod was too dense.
Yeah.
So yeah. So it's a pretty competitive environment in there.
Bronwyn, did you want to add anything more to your question, or is that helpful?
What about under the trees?
Yeah, I tend not to worry about that because there's not a huge amount of light there typically. So you're not going to grow a lot in the base case. So I generally let whatever I sow, particularly on the perennials, self-seed underneath the trees. So, some of the species that I've run that have been very effective at, essentially propagating themselves throughout the area is things like cocksfoot, which has quite a deep fibrous root, and it's self-seeded. Once you get established it in the interrow, then it moves into the area that you haven't seeded in the base case. So The clovers are the same. Clovers are great at self-seeding. And so you don't really need to focus. If you get that between the rows, you get some of your annuals or perennials into there growing effectively. They will migrate underneath the trees, and you don't have to muck around with trying to figure out how to do that. Is
Thanks.
my
And do we
experience.
is it just rain fed, or have you got some sort of watering in the interrow?
No, it's all rain fed. We don't have any irrigation.
Thanks. And on the
Thanks.
trees is irrigation?
No.
Electrical? No. Okay.
No.
Oh, that's the dry. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Brendan. Darren, did you want to add anything or?
I suppose like what strikes me is that probably if you're doing citrus in a lot of locations, you are going to irrigate, and that's going to stimulate growth, which you then have to manage. And it's a matter of then of what you use to manage. And if you don't have animals, well, then it's going to be mechanical management. And there's quite a few tools, especially out of Italy. I spent a fair bit of time over there working with people, and there's some great tools which haven't necessarily made it here, which you can run along there. A lot of them are hydraulic motors, and they've got hydraulic actuators which are dodge the trees, or they're used in vineyards and so on. And they can be pretty low impact in terms of soil surface disturbance. You can also get cultivators as well from Italians. Love a bit of cultivation, so there's the same companies produce them as well. But yeah, there's some really good gear out there for if you don't have livestock or that doesn't fit for you to use with minimum disturbance.
Thanks.
Thanks, Darren. There are a couple of questions around soil organic carbon and organic matter. From Robin, like what is a realistic goal using the regen tools that they have available to, like what's a realistic target for organic matter in sandy soils? It sounds like local orchards are currently ranging from 0.7 up to 1.5.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's this sort of I mean, at one stage people were saying 8% soil organic carbon was sort of like the optimum, because if you started to shift over beyond that, then you started to get nutrient tie-ups, and it's like, well, there aren't many people in the world who've got that problem, right? So we sort of still show us the data a bit on that. But as you said, in sandy soils, it's difficult. I think the most important thing to just start as a principle, though, is to restore what David Tongway called landscape function, and starting off with that is just trying to get soils covered, trying to get nutrient cycling on the soil surface, try to get infiltration better sorted, trying to get stability is the most important thing. And then as a result of that, we're going to see some incremental increases in soil organic carbon. To what degree that will be, that's ultimately going to be as a result of your management and what soil surface or how you can manage the soil surface in terms of vegetation. So, because we can go and put all sorts of stuff on there, but ultimately, as Campbell has found, he didn't get the bounce from putting stuff on. He got the bounce that he got in his case from management. It wasn't from going and putting 20 tons of compost per hectare or anything like that. I mean, you can do that, but a lot of that's just going to go back into the atmosphere anyway as it oxidizes.
Yeah.
So it's very labile. So yeah, in my opinion, the starting point is always increasing landscape function.
The other question was from Rhiannon, but also about soil organic carbon targets, but also infiltration rates for a 600 mil rainfall area. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that? I guess it's a similar response to what you just gave, Darren.
Yeah, I mean, look at what you've got right now. And there's some pretty simple methods of testing infiltration rates as you've got now, which is helpful. And then trying to just it's remarkable how soil surface cover with plants and how remarkably it impactful that is on increasing infiltration rates. It's yeah. So that's the main thing that you can do. You can mechanically intervene by using subsoilers and so on, but as we talked about earlier, if you go starting to use subsoilers, you start to really damage root systems potentially, because a lot of the trees that we're growing in orchards have really shallow surface roots, and
Yep.
it's the inter-row areas are in many cases more important than along the row, because that's where they're doing all their feeding. So you've got to be really cautious about that. So just trying to get the landscape covered with plants is the most important thing to do, I think. And we've got such good direct drilling technology and so on now. As you found, Campbell, there's a lot of ways to be able to get plant life growing.
Thanks, Darren. Courtney, have we got a sec if I just clarified? Thank you. I was thinking the transition and the of your grove, Campbell, from the set stocked clapped out paddock to a perennial tree crop, and then the resulting changes in those soil health indicators, how much and so I just got to wondering, if we had a longer term orchard, where would we sort of expect those baselines to be? But I think you really touched on it, Darren, around that landscape function, returning that, and then all of those other flow-on effects would come. And I guess I was probably thinking around the quantification of that change, Campbell. How much was the turning that farming system on its head and implementing something different, and how others could then I guess take those further lessons from the types of things that you've implemented, the regen and resilience practices.
Yeah, so I think growing a lot of biomass, to Darren's point, is a fantastic way of improving soil health, landscape function. And so, because the advantage is that's the easiest way to get carbon into the soil, is to actually grow plants. They will pump carbon into the soil, and then you'll get a lot of microbial activity, and it becomes self-fulfilling to a large extent. Your soil really starts to work, which you sort of notice that in my pH chart. Is nothing much happened, and then all of a sudden you start doing some of these things and it starts coming together. And if you're not really certain about anything, then try a small area. I think Graham Hand's approach of safe to fail areas is a pretty good way to go. If you have a large property and you're saying, well, look, so actually seed is pretty cheap, and getting it into the ground is pretty cheap too. But even so, if you say, well, I'm not too sure about this, and what difference will it make? Well, just do a small area and then see what happens to infiltration. Measure that over a period of time, compare that to a standard, and say, oh, okay, this is really starting to get some results. I'll keep doing that. I think to some extent, because we're a relatively small grove, my experiments were across the entire grove, and to some extent, I would change more than one thing at a time, which, from a pure scientific approach is not ideal, but I guess I sort of thought, okay, some of these things are co-mutual in terms of 1 + 1 gives you 3. So I think for me at least, it was a matter of I tried quite a few things. You've got to monitor, and I've got a lot of data because I monitor a lot of things over time, and so then I can say, well, that didn't work. 1 to 2 years later, not much is happening. Try something different, try something different, try something different. And then all of a sudden you find something that works in your context. And you sort of say, well, okay, let's keep doing more of that, maybe more of this and a little less of that, etc. So you can sort of tailor make it to your particular location by, doing something, seeing if it works. Lots of people have got great ideas. Not all of them will work in your context. So it's a matter of going, okay, try this, did it work? Yes, no. Worked a little bit. Okay, well, maybe I should do more of it, or try something else. So yeah, I guess I see it as a sort of like a work in progress in terms of trying things, seeing if they work, if they improve anything. Yes, no, but you got to have some data to do that. I hope that answered the question. Good.
Thanks, Campbell. We're wrapping up, so we've got maybe one last question from the audience. We have a 62 to 25 calcium to magnesium ratio, pH of 6.4. What is the best corrective action located in Atherton tablelands, mango and custard apples? Any, again, like a very specific question, but if you have any like questions to ask or pointers to start with, that would be interesting to hear.
Well, I mean, I was very influenced early in my career by the work that I did and the learnings that I did with Neil Kinsey, who wrote the fantastic book Hands-on Agronomy, and he came out to Australia a number of times, to South Australia, to Roseworthy, and they were great. And it was all about numbers. And what I kept seeing, and Campbell would know this very well. Once you start, like, I remember I was working at Geelong Grammar in the old Shell oil refinery, and those soils, they're these black vertisol, limestone vertisols, and so they're deep cracking clay. And the reason why they built the oil refinery at Corio was because it was on a stable base of solid limestone rock, right? So it had a really good foundation. And all through the soil profile is bits of limestone through the whole thing. And when I got the soil test back, it said we needed 40 tons of lime. And I went, okay, this isn't making sense anymore. And so I started to, and you looked at the numbers, and I can't remember what it was now, but it was around about 40-25. And the conventional wisdom at the time through the Albrecht method was that you want 68-12. 68% of the cations should be calcium and 12% magnesium. And we kept saying that you weren't, like, where did we ever get the perfect set of numbers? And so I started to just go, well, how's the actual place behaving? What are we seeing in terms of plant health, animal health, plant diversity? Are we getting any dominance of any volunteer plant populations, which are, suggesting particular imbalances and so on? And then also started to look at foliar tests, because a soil test is one thing, a foliar test or a sap test is a whole other thing. So we started to look at things a bit differently, rather than just through the prism of looking at just the soil tests themselves and the balance of calcium and magnesium. Yeah, because I mean the conventional wisdom with a 62-25 is that you have to that magnesium's recalcitrant, and it's going to be difficult to get it down to 12, right? So you go, oh, I can't get the right numbers. So what what am I going to do? Well, how's the place behaving, and what are the limitations that you're seeing in terms of growth and the expression of this situation? And what are the cues that we might have there? So I think, yeah, soil tests are important, but I reckon it's also important to look at the whole, is probably my main message there.
Yeah,
Great.
and probably just to add to that, Darren, is that doing a foliar or a sap test really tells you how the plant is reacting, and if in that situation the plant was telling you it needed more calcium because it was you had too much magnesium, then foliar spray the calcium until your tree gets to the point where it's happy. And not worry too much about, because the soil will then, the tree will then feed that down into the soil as required. And I think you'll find that your soil will change as a result. So, to some extent, there's faster ways to get to that result without applying soil calcium via lots of lime, for example.
Is that helpful, Charlie? Did you want to add anything? Great, thank you. just to wrap up, I'd just love to ask one final question. If you do have an established orchard and you feel like there are some flaws in the original design, what are the biggest management levers you've got available, or are there small design tweaks that we should be thinking about um, to start to move things in the right direction in terms of soil health and resilience?
Sorry, was that
Is
a
that,
question? A question
yeah,
or
is
stuff?
that, is
Sorry.
that a question for you,
I was
Darren?
I was reading through all of the comments, so I didn't.
Oh, good,
Yeah,
oh, good.
sorry.
Like if you do have an established orchard,
Yeah,
like you don't want to be ripping out your trees.
yeah,
Like what are the kind of design tweaks or
yeah.
like earliest management levers that what someone has?
Well, sometimes you may have to. I mean, trees in orchards have a life, so there's going to be a productive life. It's really hard to make trees better once they've got to a point, I've found. It's so that's something you're going to have to face up to. I think one of the common tricks that is used though is to go in and use pruning, so that you can you're looking at what can I do to the tree itself, like physically in terms of pruning, so that you can reinvigorate it because it's got a lot of dead wood on it. Pruning is, or coppicing, you might say in other practices, tree management practices is one thing. We're looking at our foliars. I think foliars are very powerful in terms of being able to, get things in quickly, much faster results than you would get from soil amendment application, for example. And then also trying to, if you do have any growth on the surface, actually letting it grow so that it can go through a life cycle. A slide I presented there, which I skipped over quickly because I wanted to give Campbell as much time as possible, was one that I drew up from, I was with John Kempf a few years ago at Polyface Farm, and he was talking about carbon partitioning. And we're talking, like he said, this shouldn't be the grass farm, what was it, the Stockman grass farmer gathering. It should be the Stockman forb farmer gathering, because forbs, as opposed to grasses, put so much more carbon into the soil than grasses do. And if that's what you want to do, well, that's what you team up with. And so often we don't have much diversity on the floor of the orchard because we mow it all the time. We're trying to keep it spick and span, but actually allowing that to change, encouraging pollinators to come in, and encouraging what I would call a trophic cascade to actually occur, is something that we often don't allow to happen. And so that, they're the sort of immediate cues I would look to do.
Amazing. Thank you. We might have to wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Darren and Campbell. That was super fascinating. We've got a short survey there if you have 2 minutes to just quickly give us some feedback about what you found helpful, and if there's any other topics that you'd like to cover through this project. If you have any experiences you'd like to share, we'd love to hear it. If there are any other farmers or specialists you'd like to hear from, please let us know. But big thank you to you both, Darren and Campbell, for your time and sharing your wide-ranging experiences.
No problem at all. Anytime.
Yeah, all good.
Thanks, guys. Have a lovely afternoon, and hope to see you all at our upcoming convos later this week and next week.